The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, at least in Puerto Rico, rainy, what is it today? Tuesday night. All right, everybody ready for Yaron Brook Show? So I figured we're all tired of this election stuff. We're all tired of the fraud that never seems to appear from anywhere. We're all tired from bad sports and presidents-elects who are going to violate our rights and move us closer to the abyss. So let's talk about personal virtues, because that's what I get paid to do. And that's something you can use in your own life. It's something that's important for your own life. It's not something that depends on what goes on in places that we have no control over. So today we're going to talk about virtue number 6. We got 5. We got 2 more to go. I can't add. I'm tired. All right, we got, after today, we got integrity and pride. Today we're going to talk about productiveness. I think we've covered all the others. So integrity and pride. Integrity will be next week. Pride will be the following week. And then after that, we're going to talk about Christian virtues and values and how they fit or don't fit with the objectivist virtues. They primarily don't, as you can imagine. But it's going to be fun, particularly when we talk about Christian vices. I think talking about Christian vices is going to be a lot of fun. So that will be kind of the follow-up. So that's the program. We're going to do integrity, pride, maybe a wrap-up show for the virtues and values, and then a show on Christian virtues and vices, maybe 2 shows on Christian virtues and vices. Tomorrow there'll be a show, 8 p.m. East Coast time. That's right, 8 p.m. East Coast time, 9 p.m. Puerto Rican time. Don't know what we'll do that. Probably something in the current events. We'll probably go back to what's going on in the world, maybe talk about vaccines, maybe something else. We'll see what happens between today and tomorrow. The news cycle actually is slowed down a little bit. Yeah, plenty to talk about tomorrow. So that'll be 8 p.m. East Coast time. All right, in the meantime, don't forget before you leave to like the show. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And, of course, don't forget to support the show. Super Chat is a great way to do so. You can, I prioritize the answers to Super Chat based on how much money you put into the question. The more money, the higher priority it gets. Of course, also, if you ask questions about the topic we are talking about, you get priority. So questions on topic, questions of $20 and more get priority in the Super Chat. Super Chat has become a significant source of revenue for the Yaron Brook Show. So please keep it up. We'll there we go, Michael. That's great. That's great. We'll take this quick question from Michael because he put so much money into it, and then we'll jump to productiveness. Hey, JDS, thank you. Really appreciate that. If I'm in a concentration camp and I kill a kid and take his food, that feels immoral to me. But objectivism states there is no right or wrong in such a lifeboat context. Or are you immoral for allowing yourself to be placed in a camp to begin with? No, I mean, you're not immoral to allow yourself to be placed in a camp to begin with. I mean, it's out of your control. Somebody pulls a gun and drags you to the concentration camp. You're trying at this point to survive. I agree with you, and it should feel immoral to you to kill a kid to take his food in a concentration camp. Because it's an act that in any other context would be immoral. And, your emotions, your feelings are not going to catch up with this crazy context. And not only that, I'll tell you this, if you kill a kid to take his food in a concentration camp, it'll haunt you for the rest of your life. It's going to be very difficult to get over that fact, and that's part of the consideration that you should think about in that situation. But yes, there's no right or wrong in such a lifeboat scenario. And the fact, particularly in a concentration camp, your existence in the concentration camp is not your fault. So anything you do in that concentration camp to stay alive, and assume you're killing this other person, this kid, in order to stay alive. It's a life or death for you. There is, any violent action that happens in the concentration camp is the person who puts you in the concentration camp. It's their fault. Morally, it's their responsibility. But look, it sucks to be in a concentration camp, and there's no way out of it. There's no easy way out. There's no I can do whatever I want to do, and there are no consequences to it. So, and there is a certain nobility in a situation like a concentration camp, to not succumb to the violence around you, even if that means you're dead, right? The idea of the LA whatever is, give your food to women and children. Not because it's moral, because again, morality is out of the question here, but because I don't know that you could live with yourself if you didn't. It would be really hard. And this is why you don't want to get to the concentration camp. You want to fight to avoid the concentration camp. You want to fight to avoid the situation where there is such a thing as a concentration camp. This is part of why it's so important, because once you're in that context, all the choices you make are bad choices. It's not like when we say morality is not a factor, it means all choices are equal. It doesn't mean also that all choices are equally good. No, it's the opposite. It means that all choices, in a sense, are equally bad. There is no good choices in a concentration camp. So, it is not that there are no consequences to your actions. It's not that you won't suffer for your actions. It's, again, that there's no good choices. No good choices. And it's not even that all choices are equal, are the same. All right, wow, the Super Chat questions are rolling in. I'm going to have to defer them. I've marked the ones that are $20 or more, so they will get priority. I'm going to, all right, I didn't see that, Troy. I'll dig that up. So Troy is offering a Super Chat challenge. Thank you, Troy. For the last show of the series. I will look that up and check it out. I didn't see that, and we've actually got one more challenge that's going to come that we'll probably do next week. So we'll do the challenge either on, well, Troy, you tell me if you want it on the Pride is the Queen of the Virtues that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks probably, or if you want it to be done on the Christian virtues and vices. So we can do it on either one of those. I have to think about which one I think will attract the most people. I have a feeling actually the Christianity one will attract more people. But yeah, that's great. We will definitely, we'll do that. Thank you, Troy. All right. Productiveness. Why is productiveness a virtue? And we might as well review for a second what makes a virtue a virtue. Why are these things that we're articulating virtues? Well, the first one was easy in a sense, right? Because the first one was that which is required for human survival. It's required, and we can see that. It's not, I wouldn't say it's obvious, but it's, once you think about it, the thing that is required for human beings to survive is to think. It's to be rational. It's to use one's reason. So the first virtue is directly comes from reality, directly comes from the nature of man. It directly comes from the fact that we do not have automatically programmed in us the ability to survive, the knowledge of what to do, as in a sense other animals do. We have to discover it. We have to think. We have to use our mind. That is why rationality is the first virtue, and as well, and really the integrating virtue, in a sense the only virtue. Everything else is an application of. But we'll see that when we talk about pride. We'll also talk about what Ayn Rand calls the unity of the virtues. Maybe it's Leonard Peikoff actually talks about it. I can't remember if it's if Ayn Rand directly talks about the unity of the virtues, but certainly Leonard does. That the unity of the virtues, they're all basically united around this idea of rationality. Now, every one of the virtues is a principle to guide our actions in pursuit of our life. And every one of them is an important, essential application of the virtue of rationality. So, honesty, well, you have to be honest to be rational. Independence, well, there's nobody else to do the thinking. You're it. And to do good thinking, you have to do it yourself. Every one of them is an application in that sense. Now, productiveness is more than an application of rationality. Because it's not enough to think. It's not enough to think. Yes, Kelsey mentions Leonard Peikoff's course, Unity in Ethics and Epistemology, which is another one of the kind of required lecture courses for anybody who really wants to dig deep into the objectivist ethics or into the objectivist philosophy. There are a lot of those Leonard Peikoff courses that are required, and they're all gems, they're all fun, they're all deep, they're all really, really important and worth listening to. But again, unity in ethics and epistemology is this idea that it's all one. It's all about man's life, and it's all about survival and happiness, and it's all about being rational. But to think is not enough. We're not beings that can move the world from our thoughts. Action is required. To act based on those thoughts in order to survive is to be productive. And in order to survive, the kind of action we must engage in is the production of material values. We're a material being in a material world which requires material values to survive. The very basics, from food, clothing, shelter, Ferraris, all the material, iPhones, obviously, all the material values that are necessary for human survival, for human flourishing, for human happiness. So productiveness is the recognition that we must use our mind to create the material values necessary for us to survive. that those material values are not given. You remember a few shows ago, I talked about the Garden of Eden, right? In the Garden of Eden, all the material values necessary for human survival just are there. They just appear. No effort, no work, no thought, therefore, is actually needed in order to produce the material values necessary for human survival. And arguably, Adam and Eve are not human. Is this, I wonder if this is sacrilegious, and I'm now an apostate. Adam and Eve are not human. If what makes human being human is their rational faculty, in a sense of what makes human beings human is the need to think and produce in order to survive, then Adam and Eve are not human until they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Think about Marx's utopia. In Marx's utopia, we go back to the Garden of Eden. In Marx's utopia, no effort is required, no thought is required for all of your needs to be met. They're just met. It's a completely mystical place. So it's sad because it seems like the Judeo-Christian tradition through the Garden of Eden myth, then embedded into Marxism, have implanted in our culture a certain mythology that says that the ideal for human beings is that condition where you don't have to think, you don't have to work, you don't have to produce. Productiveness is not necessary. The stuff you need in order to survive, to thrive, to live as a human being is just appears. And therefore we view work as burdensome, thinking as hard and an effort, and why do I need to do this? Instead of embracing thinking and working and being productive as the means to a successful, happy, prosperous, flourishing, fulfilling life, towards an ideal, indeed viewing thinking and working as an ideal, as the ideal for human beings given their nature, we are set up with a context, with a mythology, with an ideal that is no work, no thinking, just lay around all day and stuff, you just get your stuff. And you can see that in young people who say, why do I have to go to work? I had a kid ask me this question at the University of Texas in Austin last year. Why do I need to go to work? I want to just pursue my hobbies. I mean, isn't that the promised land? Isn't that the ideal? Isn't the Garden of Eden the ideal? And this is why in many respects, communism is a secularization of Christianity. And this is why in many respects, Marxism and Christianity, and Judaism, because it really comes from Judaism, precondition us, in a sense, culturally, to have a very negative attitude towards being productive, towards work, towards this world. I mean, do you think anybody goes to work in heaven? Do you think anybody has to be productive in heaven? Is there a profit motive in heaven? No, we're told. Heaven is a return to the Garden of Eden. That is the ideal condition for mankind. And you can see how dangerous and damaging that is. No. Mankind is a particular being. And this particular being needs, must, has to, both for material reasons and for spiritual reason, has to work. Has to be productive. Has to engage in activity that shapes his environment to fit his needs. So in OPA, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, by Leonard Peikoff, the subheading under productiveness is productiveness as the adjustment of nature to man. That's a great formulation. Productiveness as the adjustment of nature to man. As we talked about when we talked about rationality, man is not born with the knowledge, with the ability to know automatically what to do, how to do it, how to survive. Not only when we discover the knowledge, but he must also change his environment to fit his needs. Other animals are adapted to an environment through evolution. And if that environment changes, if it changes dramatically enough, they die out. They die out. Human beings don't die out. This is the whole point about, the panic about climate change. We don't die out. We change our environment to fit our needs. If things get warm, we invent air conditioning. If oceans rise, we build dikes. If things get cold, we come up with fire or burning natural gas, electricity. We change our environment to fit our needs. We adapt through the productive process. We don't just sit back and let the environment dictate our lives. We change it. And therefore, we cannot hold the environment as it is as some kind of given, some kind of static thing. No, the environment is there for us to use for the purpose of our survival. And notice that this completely turns around, upside down, the environmentalist claim that there's an environment out there. It's the good. It's pristine, or staying pristine is the good, and we must adapt to it. So if what we're doing makes it warmer, we should stop doing that. Well, maybe we should do something else to offset what we're doing, or maybe we should just adapt to the fact that it's going to be warmer. I mean, there are a lot of options. But they take for granted that nature, the environment, Mother Earth, however you want to call it, is the good. And just like any other animal, if it changes, we're just supposed to roll over and die. No. So, productiveness is the recognition that we must work to create physical values, and the work that is required to create physical values involves changing our environment to fit our needs. Changing our environment to fit our needs. Everything we need, from clothes to shelter, requires changing the environment. Whether it's killing animals and skinning them to use their skin, which requires knowledge, by the way. You try it sometime. Kill an animal and skin it. Both those require skill, which requires thought, which requires effort, which requires, tools, weapons, strategies, all things of the mind. So every material values requires thinking, requires action, requires effort. The values that are required for our survival as a species, as individuals, have to be conceived before they create, and then they have to be created. Somebody has to think of them, and somebody has to act to make them a reality. Think and make it a reality. That's what productiveness is. Productiveness is the process of making them a reality. Productiveness is the process, this is the definition, of creating material values, whether goods or services. Right? Andrew says, objectivism's connection of productivity to morality is integral to making life a spiritual experience. Well, yes. Productiveness, I would say, is necessary to making life a spiritual experience, because I think we get our spiritual values from the purpose we have, and we'll get to purpose is connected directly to productiveness. Purpose, our central purpose, is going to be our productive purpose. And notice that how unique objectivism is in making productiveness a virtue. I mean, other ethical systems, yeah, you got to go to work, you got to make a living, maybe personal responsibility. But there's no emphasis on this idea of using your mind to change reality, to create the values necessary for human production. And this is why objectivism is so unique in its view of the producer. Its view of the producer. Objectivism views the producer as, in his actions as a producer, moral and good. Because he is producing, he's creating material values necessary for his and our survival. Right? So, we know that to be a producer requires knowledge, requires thinking, requires action, requires the creation of something new. Right? Productiveness is defined as the creation of material values. And you have to create, you have to think, you have to imagine, you have to then have a plan, you have to actually put the resources together. It's not obvious. Right? So it's not enough. Somebody asked early on, not in the super chat, he said, is listening to your on book show a productive activity? Only if you turn it into action. Only if you apply it to your own life and apply it to how you live and apply the knowledge you get from it to your own life. Otherwise, it's just entertainment. If it's just listening and enjoying it or learning for the sake of learning, but there is no learning for the sake of learning. Knowledge is to be applied. It's to be productive. Knowledge must be applied in some way. To some way to make your life better. Okay? So, for objectivism, a scientist is productive when he takes his discoveries and writes them down and publishes a book. But the fact that he's a scientist doesn't make him more productive than the person that takes his scientific discovery and turns it into, call it a gadget. Well, Leonard calls it a gadget. There's no dichotomy between pure science and its products, the gadgets, the tools, the technology, the things that we use it for. Right? The purpose of knowledge is a better life. And a better life is achieved partially at least, through material values. And here I consider material values also, music is material, right? It needs to be, somebody having a tune in his head is not productive. He has to play it. And in the modern era, turn it into a record or CD or stream it. That's when it becomes productive. Of course, So, for objectivism, unique among all moral codes, productive ability as such, deserves the highest accolades. And this is why, putting aside everything else, I'm such a fan of Silicon Valley. Because it is a place of immense productive achievement, productive ability. They produce values, which I benefit from, but even if I don't, somebody is benefiting from, and these people are living the life. Because what is the life? The life is a life of value production. You cannot be happy. You cannot make a happy life without being engaged in some form of productive activity, in some form of using your knowledge, using your mind for your own betterment. So productive ability is a value by the standard of man's life, Leonard Peikoff writes. And because, like all values, a course of virtue is required in order to gain and keep it. And what is the course to gain and keep productive ability? Well, it's knowledge and development of skill. It's having ideas and then putting them into practice. You have to acquire, you have to use, all, right? All through a volitional process. You have to be committed to reality. I mean, imagine you have great ideas and it's completely detached from the real world. And you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to be able to produce anything. You're not going to be able to create any kind of values. It's going to be completely detached and floating. And think about all the virtues that we've talked about, right? Reason, independence, honesty. All of those have to be there, have to be applied if you're going to be productive. You're not going to create any values if you're not rational. If you can't think, if you refuse to think, if you evade, if you go by your emotions, nothing gets produced. How are you going to produce if you're constantly worried about other people and what they think, if you're not independent, if you're a second-hander? I mean, there's no iPhone if Steve Jobs is a second-hander. There's no anything of value. Nothing of value is built. No progress is made from somebody who is not an independent thinker, who is completely dependent on others. You have to be in focus. You have to think. You have to be independent. And of course, you must be honest. Garbage in, garbage out. We talked about this. And if you're going to create something that's not garbage, you better be honest with yourself. You better be focused on facts. You better be focused on reality. You better not be just floating out there, detached from all of that. Every job, every work engages the human mind if you choose to engage. And if you want to do a good job, you're going to have to engage your mind. The fact is, particularly in the modern world, there's very little work that actually requires pure physical labor. Most of it requires mental labor, and some requires physical labor, but is enhanced if you think about it and you discover better ways to do it. Now, because productive work requires the application of all the other virtues. By the way, justice is huge in productive work, particularly if you work with other people. But even if you don't, even if you're an independent, who do you take on as a client? You have to judge people. You have to come to conclusions about them. Who is worthy as a client? Who's worthy as an employee? Who's worthy as a boss? How should you judge your coworkers? Who should do what? Constantly, every aspect of productive activity requires the application of every one of the other virtues. This is what makes it so important. This is what makes it spiritually required for happiness and for having a complete life. Not only does it provide you with the knowledge that you can take care of yourself, the knowledge that you can supply the things that are necessary for you to survive and to thrive, the material requirements of your own life. But it also engages you in all the activities that are life enhancing. Focus, thinking, independence, honesty, justice. You have to engage with all the virtues all the time. It is intense. It is demanding. It requires massive effort. And that's why it's so central to human life. All right. So, for the virtues are geared ultimately towards our values: reason, purpose, self-esteem. And all the virtues are geared to all the values. So it's not like a one-to-one relationship. The 7 virtues, the 3 values. All of them are directly related. But if you think about productiveness is directly related to purpose. Why? Now, I did a whole show on purpose. I encourage you to go and review that show if you're interested in this. But purpose is a requirement for human life. We need a reason for this value versus that value. Why this value? There has to be a purpose for what we're doing. Otherwise, we're just drifting. We have no clue. This value, that value. We have to have a hierarchy of values. We have to build a hierarchy of values. And for that, there has to be a purpose to all of these values. There has to be a goal, something we're trying to achieve with this. And to achieve that integration, to achieve the integration of all your values into a hierarchy. And a hierarchy means priorities. What's more important than what? What would I rather do than this other thing? How do I choose between A and B? Well, how do they fit into my hierarchy? But how do I create a hierarchy? And it's too broad and floating and abstract to say, created based on happiness. It's too removed. Happiness is the effect. Or survival. Survival, So you need a central purpose. You need something that will integrate all these other values so that you can prioritize based on the central purpose. It's not the only purpose. It's not in all texts the overarching, the overruling purpose, but it's the integrating purpose. You don't want things that conflict with it. And what can serve as a central purpose? What can serve as such a massive integration? Well, there really is only one activity that we engage in, and that is our productive activity. Because it engages all the other virtues, because it requires so much focus and energy and time, and because it requires so much energy and focus and time, we want to choose it based on what we love doing, what we enjoy doing, what we get satisfaction from doing. So career, your work, your productive activity, become your integrating central purpose. Become the most important thing that you do. I mean, the fact is, even in the culture, people say, oh, most important thing to me is family, or many other things. But the fact is that they spend most of their time working. So in terms of their choice in how to spend their time, they're telling you that working is more important to them. Everybody can probably work less and still do fine. We live in a pretty rich society. But people want to get richer because they want to pursue more values. They want to get richer because the wealth is an indication, a sign from reality that you are actually being productive. I think that's primarily why very wealthy people continue to work for money, because working for money continues to give them an indication that they are producing values. If they stop working for money, how do they know if what they're producing is valuable? How do you measure that? Well, the best measure of value in that context is money. It's not that they're going to consume it. Some of them are because they're going to go to Mars, but most of them are not. Most of it, it's a sign. It's a symbol. It's an indication from reality that they are being productive. So your central purpose is your career. Your central purpose is the work that you do. And work that you do is not just work. It shouldn't be just work. You should love it. You should find something that you love. And you should spend most of your focused energy on it. You should have long-term plans with regard to it. It should be a career. Now, some people's career is not like that. Let's say you're an artist, and to do the art, you have to do things on the side. You have to work as a waiter or whatever. And then it's work, and then your real career is this other thing, right? But for most of us, our career is our productive activity, is our work. And to be happy, to be truly happy as a human being, you need to be creative. I mean, you need to create, not be creative in the sense, artistic sense, but you need to create. You need to build something. You need to have that productive activity be your central purpose. You need to enjoy it, thrive in it. I mean, that doesn't mean it's not hard, by the way. The fact that you enjoy it doesn't mean it's not hard, doesn't mean it's not agonizing sometimes, doesn't mean it's not difficult. All of those things can be true, but it still should excite you. It still should thrill you, and it still, when you're successful, should be one of the best feelings in the world. Think of Reardon in Atlas Shrugged. Think of the pain, the suffering, the difficulty, the hardship of discovering Reardon metal, of creating Reardon metal. It's not discovered, it's created. But the satisfaction, the deep, deep satisfaction that comes from actually achieving it, and the value or purpose that gave him, and the self-esteem that provided him. And of course, the only way he could get it is by using his mind. So he achieved all three of the values, reason, purpose, and self-esteem, in that one activity. And that's what a good job should do. It should engage your mind, give you a central purpose, and provide you with a boost, a constant, ongoing boost to your self-esteem. And that's why it's so crucial. You cannot achieve happiness, you cannot achieve that kind of success without it. Yeah, someone says you feel a super high after solving a very difficult problem. Absolutely. And you feel a super high after achieving something significant, out of creating a real value, out of building something beautiful. Thank you, Limbeck. Very generous. Really appreciate it. All right. Let's see. What else did I... Oh, so there's a question here. Have you heard of FIRE movement? Financial independence, retire early. And if so, what do you think of it? Followers like live frugally and save aggressively so they can retire in their 30s and 40s. And then do what? What do they do in their 30s and 40s if they retire? Now, I'm not against being frugal and saving aggressively, although it's not my preferred method of living, as you know from my financial planning lecture. But what do you do if you retire in your 30s? I mean, I had this period a couple of years ago where I was, I didn't really have a full-time job. The things that I was doing were not filling my time. And it was hard. It was hard. And I have a lot of interest. I have tons to do, read, art, all kinds of stuff. But you need to be doing something. Even when you retire at 70, at age 70, you need to do something. You need to have some productive purpose. You need to have something to integrate your values. So are they going to switch careers? Are they going to work at a nonprofit? Are they going to become artists? What are they going to do when they're 30s and 40s? And don't they enjoy the job that they're doing? Do they really want to walk away from it when they're 30 or 40? Hobbies are not enough. Now, maybe they're enough for the last 10 years of your life, but are they enough for when you're in your 30s and 40s on for the rest of your life? So there has to be, again, to maximize your life, to live the best life that you can, there has to be an integrating. I don't think, unless you obsess about this, that golf can replace work. Hobbies can at a certain point in life, but not in your 30s and 40s. Right? So if you want to retire early to find more meaningful work and not be, and be like, have enough money so you're not worried about work, fine, but even then, it loses something when you're not worried about it. It loses a certain edge. It loses a certain motivation. And you're spending your 20s or 30s living frugally. Why? Life is short. Don't you want to live in your 30s and 40s? Isn't that a great time to enjoy life? Enjoy your youth? I guess I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't think of my work as, I want to work really, really, really hard so I can retire. I think of my work as, I want to work really, really hard because I enjoy my work. I'm creating great values and this is a lot of fun. And I want to create a lot of wealth so I don't have to worry about money. But not so I can retire, so I don't have to worry about money. So I can keep working without worrying about money. There's value in that. There's value in getting to the point where you don't have to worry about money. But I wouldn't sacrifice the living part of it. Oh, I'm not going to go to restaurants. I'm not going to go to museums. I'm not going to go to concerts. I'm not going to go on dates. I'm not going to... Then what's the point in living? I'll do that when I'm 40. What if you drop dead tomorrow? What if you get cancer? Who knows what will happen? Why would you plan your life for another 30 years from now? You plan your life for now and for the process of from now to 30 years from now. But you might give up instant gratification for something in the future, but you don't give up all instant gratification. What's the purpose of life then? Okay. So no, I don't buy into that. All right, any other questions on productiveness? I'm just looking here to see if I've covered everything. Productiveness, your work should mean everything to you. It should be part of who you are. Again, think of how it worked. Think of what his work meant to him and how important it was to him and to his identity and to his character. I mean, that's the ideal. The ideal is it's fully integrated in that way. Right? It's fully integrated in that way. Again, productive person has self-esteem. And by the way, being dedicated to work doesn't mean you don't have friends. Remember, how it work has Dominique, he has a love interest, he has names slip out of my mind. He has friends. He enjoys having friends. He enjoys hanging out with them. But part of the enjoyment comes from the fact that he knows, he has the self-esteem that he knows of his own worth. He knows of his own productive ability. He knows he can take care of himself. He's not dependent on anybody. He's approaching friendship, other people, as an independent, productive entity. All right, I think that is an introduction to productiveness. Happy to take any questions about the topic in the super chat. Otherwise, we'll just go to the super chats that already exist. Mallory is a sculptor friend, yes. And Stephen Mallory, he's an artist who has not accepted independence as a virtue and is letting the rest of the world crush him. The same happened to the architect that How to Work learns from, right? Cameron. They're crushed by others. How to Work doesn't let others crush him because of his supreme virtue of independence. Somebody says Ayn Rand was a workaholic. I hate that term. I don't know what a workaholic is. I don't think anybody good is a workaholic. They're not obsessed with work. They're not addicted to work like an alcoholic is addicted to alcohol. They love their work. You don't say I'm a loveholic because I love to love. Saying somebody's a workaholic is an insult because it's saying that their work is a neurotic thing that they have to do, that they don't have a choice. No. Rourke, Reardon, Dagny, Ayn Rand have to work. We all have to work. They recognize the importance of work. They recognize the importance of work both for their material and spiritual survival. That their life depends on it, and therefore they do it a lot, and therefore they engage in it, therefore they focus on it. It's not an obsession. It's not a neurotic obsession. It's not something you're addicted to. Yeah, she might have taken something to keep her awake because she was on a roll in a productive process. That's not addicted to the work. And I don't think she was addicted to any medications. Don't believe everything you read about Ayn Rand. So no, work when it's enjoyable. Work when you know it's important. Work when you ascertain its value to your own life. Work when you know the value it pertains to you is something you relish and you do a lot of, not because you're addicted to it, but because you see its value. It's because you choose to do it. Alexander asks, what about productivity itself? I often find myself wishing I could accomplish more in a given day, while some days I exceed my expectations. My friends say I'm a workaholic. Again, I hate that term. You should stop using the term. you are trying to be more productive. And productivity is a virtue, because getting more done with less time, getting more done with fewer resources is an improvement, is a move towards more life, towards what is more life, more time. So increasing productivity itself is productive. Is productive. And therefore should be engaged in. And you know, I recommend you figure out ways to become more productive. You read up, you gain knowledge that will help you be more productive, so that you can engage in the virtue of productiveness. Productiveness is not just doing your work. The virtue of productiveness, not just doing your work, ignoring the quality, or never focusing on how to improve it, how to do it better, how to become better at something. Just doing it because that's how you've always done it. That's the opposite of the virtue of productiveness. The virtue of productiveness requires you to make the effort to become more productive, so you can buy more time, so you can get better at what you do. Yeah, the fact that you're pursuing being more productive is a virtue. It's something to be complimented on, not something to be, he's a workaholic. I mean, that's an awful, awful term. Right? Now, what about, you know, work-life balance? Everybody talks about work-life balance. Yeah, I mean, you can't work all the time. It's too exhausting. And there are other important aspects of life. Love, romantic love, sex, friendship, art, just pleasure and entertainment. All of those are important. And one has to balance them out. And there are different points in the career where they have a different balance. You know, if you're trying to break into investment banking and you're 24 years old, you better be ready to work 100-hour weeks. Do the math. There are not that many more hours in a week than 100. You don't sleep much. You work every day. You put everything else aside and you work. That's not a workaholic. That's somebody who's ambitious and trying to make it in a very competitive, difficult field. But at some point, if you're a partner at Goldman Sachs or you're a partner in a venture capital firm or everything, you're still going to work hard, but you're not going to do 100 hours a week. You're going to spend time with your family. You're going to go to a concert. You're going to listen to music. You also have now the wealth that allows you the convenience to do all the things that you want to do. So it depends on when, right? When in your career cycle, when in your life cycle. But the idea that you should either ignore all these other values because, oh, this is my central value is wrong. You need to find a balance, and each one of us will find a balance, differently. But the culture is pushing. American culture is a little different, but most culture pushes you that work is not that important. It's something that has to get done, but don't take it too seriously. And you're a workaholic if you do too much of it. Whereas objectivism is telling you, no, it is your central purpose. You should do what you need to do in order to achieve your values in your work. But don't forget that you have other needs. And cultivate those needs in the context of your work. And when you need them. So in different phases of your career, in different phases in life, in different times of life, you're going to need different things. And be aware of that. Be introspective. Be self-conscious about all of that. How do you view the argument against technology based on compassion for low-skilled workers whose jobs are made irrelevant by technology? I don't believe it. I don't believe their jobs, some of their jobs will become irrelevant. But first of all, I don't think that's low-skilled workers. I know a lot of high-skilled workers whose jobs are going to be irrelevant. If you're a radiologist, you read MRIs and CAT scans, your job is going to become irrelevant because AI, a A computer can do it better and faster than you can. If not now, in 10 years, 20 years, for sure. Already, there are companies that have products that can detect breast cancer better than a human being can, and earlier than a human being can. So, but let's say low-skilled workers. I don't feel for them because I know that technology creates more work than it destroys. So if you're a low-skilled worker, what you want to be thinking about, and the idea that low-skilled workers can't think is wrong. They can think. At whatever level they can think. What are going to be the opportunities when my job gets destroyed? How do I prepare myself for that day? And by the way, computers make us smarter. Artificial intelligence, I mean, whether you like that term or not, what they mean by AI and machine learning and all that, will make us even smarter. And somebody who's not so smart can be elevated dramatically by a machine. So the number of jobs that they will have will grow. The number of options they will have will grow. It's the exact opposite of what people are worried about, is what actually happens. All right. I mean, we've all been hearing these arguments about lost jobs because of technology for 250 years. And yet it never happens. More jobs are created. More and more jobs are created. And that will not end because of robots and AI. Quite the contrary. Robots and AI will create more jobs that are more productive, that gain you more wages, that allow you to do more things and to buy more values with them. All right. Let's see. We answered that. Right. All right. In the next bunch of inside the ballpark questions again. Are Europeans more altruistic than Americans when it comes to wealth redistribution, but more egoistic when it comes to sex? Because I think Europeans have shrugged off some of the baggage of Christianity, primarily when it comes to sex and other social niceties. Is sex a social nicety? No. And other things, I'd have to think about exactly what. But they've shrugged off certain aspects of Christianity. But because Christian altruism was secularized by European philosophers, and now became dominant, that is, the secularized version of altruism became dominant, they kept that portion of it. And I'm not sure they're egoists when it comes to sex. I think there's too much in their attitude towards sex that is selfless. Not altruistic, but selfless. In a sense that it's not about values. It's about, instant gratification. It's about momentary pleasure. Not about the full spiritual and, physical pleasure that sex can provide. So I think much of their sex is selfless, whereas Americans still hold on to both the altruistic version, the Christianity both in its altruistic sense and the whole package deal. And that includes a negative attitude towards sex. So I think when Europeans discarded Christianity, they discarded Christianity's negative view of sex. But they did not embrace egoism, so they never really learned fully the true meaning of sex, the full meaning of sex. Right? And therefore, they're way too promiscuous. So they're not egoistic, but they're also not being held back by Christianity in terms of sexual attitudes. How can you be productive as a student? So I'm a top student in college, but I don't think getting good grades is enough to be productive. No, you're at this point, you are preparing yourself to be productive. And being a top student is the best preparation. That is, assuming what you're studying is worthwhile. It's a preparation for being productive. And part of what you want to make sure when you're studying is that the knowledge you're gaining, you're holding as, what can I do with this? Whether it's what can I do with this to improve my own life, what can I do with it out there in terms of productive activity when I get out of college. So college is definitely this intermediary step between being from a child to being a productive adult, where you're not, unless you've got a job on the side where you're creating some values to be able to afford being a student. But if your parents are paying for it, then no, you're not being productive as a student. That's fine. You're prepping to be productive. And there's a sense in which writing exams, getting grades, is in a limited manner productive because it's a physical manifestation of what you know. But it really is prep. It's not an end in itself. Being a student is not an end in itself. It's preparing you for life after being a student. All right. In the next 10 years, do you think we'll see an objectivist Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk figure rise in the culture? It makes me sad to think we don't see at least somewhat objectivist shift in your lifetime. I hope so. I certainly hope so. Don't be sad for my lifetime. Focus on your lifetime. I hope so. There's certainly some really amazing objectivist entrepreneurs out there. One of them could be the next, I don't know if Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, but the next thing. The next big success. They're constantly entrepreneurs, young people learning objectivism, going to apply them. So you could see that. We had John Allison. John Allison is not quite Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, but in the banking industry, he was considered one of the bankers of his generation and considered the philosophy banker. And he was quite out there about his relationship to Ayn Rand. So certainly John Allison was that kind of a figure, but I'd like to see more of those. And I'd love to see them in technology, and I'd love to see them become super successful and super innovative and super identified in the world as, wow, he's an Ayn Rand fan, he's an objectivist, and he's changed my life. That would be huge, and that would give us enormous leverage. Can you give the objectivist position on Say's law, the law of markets, which sees production as constituting demand? And why was Keynes wrong when he claimed there can be a demand deficiency, general glut? Objectivism is completely compatible with Say's law. Say's law says that production or supply constitutes demand. That if you supply a good, a value, then people will demand it. And the fact that people demand it will create the supply for it. So in a sense, supply and demand are two sides of the same coin. But production is primary because there are no values without production. There's nothing to consume without production. Production is the starting point. It's not the purpose. The purpose is consumption. But there is no consumption without production. So the starting point in economics is production. And in that sense, it's completely consistent with objectivism. Say was a phenomenal economist, way ahead of his time in the 19th century. And one can learn a lot from reading him. Keynes was wrong when he claimed that demand efficiency, because why would people stop demanding stuff? We consume in order to live. We consume in order to further our life. Why would we suddenly stop furthering our lives? So the only reason we might stop consuming is if we suddenly couldn't produce, or were worried that in the future we couldn't produce. And if we were worried in the future we couldn't produce, then we would stop consuming today and start saving to be able to produce to be able to consume in the future. But what is the problem? What's the fundamental problem there? The fundamental problem is this uncertainty that people have about the ability to make a living in the future. Why do they have that? The problem is then a production problem. Why are people worried about the fact that they won't have a job? Why are businessmen worried about the fact that they cannot expand and produce? Why is this a problem? And that's almost always government policy that's creating the uncertainty, that's creating the destruction, either because of some kind of monetary collapse or some kind of regulatory increase. There's something right, that prevents them from being confident about the future. And that something is almost always government. Now, it could be a virus, and you could see a decline in demand because of a virus, because people are suddenly, but it's something like that would be short-lived. It's much more likely to be a government policy that creates uncertainty, that creates the fear, that creates not the fear, the rational concern about one's ability to produce in the future given what the government is doing to the present. So demand contraction is a product of almost always government intervention, government placing constraints on our ability to produce. Okay. Rob asks, let me just see, did I miss something? Yeah, I got that one. I work for a publicly funded organization. I love the job. This creates internal conflict. Being productive feels great, but doing so on taxpayers' money feels wrong. Would quitting ultimately be the most moral thing to do? Probably, certainly if it creates internal conflict. I mean, you don't want to have internal conflict about the job. If it's a publicly funded job that would exist in a free market, but where the government today doesn't allow to exist as a private entity, where the government is basically taken over, then it's a legitimate job, and that's fine. What's illegitimate are jobs that the government have created that wouldn't exist if not for the government creating them. The regulator in chief, right? Chairman of the Federal Reserve. Those are illegitimate jobs. They wouldn't exist in a free market. They wouldn't exist in a free market. But as long as the work you're doing is legit, as long as you're not harming people, you're not creating disvalue through the work that you do, I think you can be whole with it. But if it really is creating internal conflict, then you should consider finding a job that doesn't create that internal conflict. All right, some inside baseball, inside the puck questions. If Nathaniel Brandon didn't believe in objectivism, what did he get from faking it? What does Richard Salzman? Well, I don't know what Richard Salzman is, and I don't want to talk about Richard Salzman. But what did Nathaniel Brandon? He got what he wanted, which is the second-handed, pretense that Ayn Rand loved him, that Ayn Rand thought he was a genius, that Ayn Rand showered him with all these compliments. The adoration of the crowds, all these crowds of objectivists who thought he was this amazing intellectual. That's what he got out of it. He got out of it the ability to satisfy his second-handed need for approval. And a fake self-esteem where he thought, whoa, look how people respond to me. I must be wonderful. Right? That's what he got out of it. But he didn't get anything valuable out of it. He got some psychological need fulfilled. The need for the approval of other people. And you can see that if you read his autobiography. You can see that. How needy Brandon is, and how much of a fake he was, and how much of a fake he acknowledges he was, and that he claims he didn't know how to get out of it. Like he got into this path and he couldn't get out of it. But that's just laziness, right? All right. Yeah, I don't want to talk about Richard Salzman. If you don't know why, then it's better that you don't know why. You're saved from the hassle. Why is Carl Barney on a crusade to attack you and ARI? Ask Carl Barney. Don't ask me. I mean, I can speculate, but you would have to ask him. Does he think his criticism is good for ARI? Well, it depends what you mean by think. No, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what he thinks. He presents it as if his criticism is good for ARI, but whether that is true to his motives, I don't know. It certainly is not true to the reality. That is, his criticism is not good for ARI. He might think it is, but whether he does or doesn't, I don't want to speculate. I'll let you speculate. You can ask him. It will improve it in some way? No, I don't think his criticism will improve it in any way. Coming from him, I just don't think it will improve it, ARI in any way. His criticism right now. So, but you know, you really should stop asking me questions about Carl Barney. If they're not interesting, I don't really want to answer them. If you're that curious, ask him. You know, he can write another essay attacking me. He can write another 25 essays attacking me. You know, let's move on. Let's get a life. Let's focus on how to live a better life. Carl Barney is not a part of how you should live a better life. That I'm willing to say. You can live a fantastic, wonderful life without ever mentioning Carl's name again. All right. Hi, Yaron. I'm a father, loving it. How do you apply objectivism to parenting? Do you ever sacrifice as a parent? Do your kids value objectivism? How do you apply objectivism to parenting? I mean, that is a whole, series, not even a lecture. That's a whole series that probably somebody else should do, not me. I mean, you basically apply it like you apply yourself to anything else. You gain knowledge, so you gain knowledge about kids, about how to deal with kids, how to engage with kids, how to develop their kid's mind, because that's the primary focus, how to develop their body, because you don't want a mind-body disintegration, how to communicate, how to deal with challenges and problems, and gain knowledge. Then have integrity, live up to what it is that you think you know about how to be the best parent possible. There's a lot of literature about how to do this, how to talk to parents, how to talk to kids, how to be a good parent, how to cultivate their thinking. Send them to Montessori schools. That's definitely part of it. Montessori is a great methodology of education, the best methodology of education, certainly for young kids. Do you ever sacrifice as a parent? No. You shouldn't. That is, giving up not going to movie for your kids is not a sacrifice. Staying up all night because your kid is sick is not a sacrifice, because you love your kid, I hope. Right? And it's not a sacrifice to stay up with them. It's not a sacrifice to help them. It's not a sacrifice to give up the movies for them, because they are higher value. A sacrifice is giving up a high value for a low value. But what's higher than your children? So when I say you don't sacrifice, it doesn't mean you don't give up stuff for them. Of course you give up stuff for them. You try being a parent without giving up tons of stuff for them. But make sure you don't give up the things that are more important to you than them. Like, don't give up your integrity. Don't give up your honesty. Don't give up your rationality. But what's more important than your child, other than those moral principles? Right? So, and then, do my kids value objectivism? One does, one doesn't. We'll leave it at that. Arguing about these election fraud claims has made me realize I need to focus more on positive things. So thank you and Troy for these shows. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Stop obsessing about politics. Nothing you can do about it. It'll work itself out. For better or for worse, there will be an outcome. You might like it, you might hate it, but it's going to be what it's going to be. And I can pretty much tell you what it's going to be, so stop worrying about it. I recently heard someone reference your book. You should tell me who. I'm curious, who referenced my book? Equal is unfair to support an argument. How are your book sales, and do you project a spike over the next few years? Book sales are pretty low. The books that I put out, they sell a lot when they first come out because all the people who know me or following me buy the book, but when they first come out, but they don't sell much after that. So they sell a little bit. Every week a few books sell, but it's not much. And unfortunately, I don't expect a spike over the next few years. I mean, it's very, very, very hard to get people engaged on large scale with books that have already been written, unless they're Ayn Rand. Now, I do expect a spike in Ayn Rand books over the next few years. I do think that is definitely a possibility. As the country shifts to the left, or as politics shift to the left, I think people run to Atlas Shrugged for comfort and for inspiration and for guidance. And I think book sales of Ayn Rand's books will go up. But I don't think my book sales will necessarily go up. I hope so. That'd be cool. You said some time ago you really didn't like faith-based religion very much. I do, but it does not give me the right to tell anyone how to live their life. No, it doesn't give you the right to tell anybody how to live their life. But I would encourage you to question faith-based religion, or faith, period. All faith. It's holding you back. Your reliance on faith-based religion is holding you back from living the best life that you can live on this planet right now in this world. Faith, by definition, has no evidence. It's irrational. It's detached from reality. Abandon it. Embrace reason. Embrace fact. Embrace reality. Embrace your life and the values necessary to live it. So, the fact that you don't have a right to tell anybody else how to live their life, absolutely. Although you can tell people how to live their life, I do all the time. The question is not, do I have a right to tell them? I have a right to tell them. I don't have a right to force them to live their life. But the question is, what kind of life do you want to live? And a faith-based religious life, not a good life. Waste. You only have one life. You only live once. There's no going back. There's no trying again. There's no getting a second or a minute, an hour back. Why waste it on pretend, on mythology, on unsubstantiated claims, when instead you've got reality, you've got your mind, and there are all these opportunities in front of you, all these opportunities to live a great, successful, happy, productive life. Why are you wasting it? And I consider faith a waste of time, waste of effort, waste of life. And you can't be first-handed. You can't be independent. None of the virtues work once you embrace faith. It undercuts rationality. It undercuts independence because you're dependent on what your priest tells you. You're dependent on what God whispers in your ear. So live for yourself based on your mind, based on reality, based on facts, based on reason. All right, we should have more likes. So before you leave, don't forget to like. That should be over 100. Really appreciate it. Helps with the algorithm, helps with everything else. Don't forget to subscribe. If you have not subscribed to the show, please subscribe. Also, hit the bell. And if you hit the bell, then you will be notified every time I go live. So you can join us for some of these great sessions. If you want to value for value, if you want to, if you get something out of the show and you want to, express your gratitude for that, if you want to be a trader, then you can use the Super Chat to support the show. You can use a Subscribe Star or Patreon or Locals, or you can go to YaronBrookShow.com/support to support the show. We're trying to get to $3,000 additional dollars. We're over now 2,000, so we're slowly getting there. But if you at all can, if you give a 5, if you can give 10, if you give 10 and you can give 25, you can give 25. If you give 25, you can give 50, and so on. Particularly if you can give 100. If you give 100 and you give 250, if you give 250 and you give 500, it would be great if you stepped up to the next level. That way we can reach our goal quickly. And of course, most importantly, I think, is if you're not a supporter of the show yet, please become one. I hugely appreciate that. So thank you to all of you for being here, for listening, for participating, for engaging. If you're listening to this after the fact and you want to make a Super Chat like contribution, you can do that. There is a applause function where you can give a contribution with the applause after the show is live. So there are all kinds of ways in which you could support the show, from $2 to thousands of dollars. I appreciate every dollar that comes in, and I consider it a trade, no matter win-win, no matter what you contribute towards it. So thank you, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. We'll have a show tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Christian says, something about Anthem. Listen to nature. Anthem. Yeah, I mean, nature, to be commanded, must be obeyed. So you first have to listen to it, first have to learn it, and then you can command it, change it, adapt it, make it yours, which is what productiveness is. It's turning nature into something useful for human beings. Turning nature into something, turning in the environment into something useful for human beings. All right, guys. Thank you. See you tomorrow.